That Friday before I went to work, I did another test kit and there was no more pink line. And I was so devastated. This was not going to happen for me if I just kept working the way I was working. I have to say, when you are trying for a child, the road seems endless. Every time someone felt pregnant, you felt bad for not being happy for them. And I think parenting has become so much more precious when you do have a kid. And at the same time, so much more pressurizing. Because there's that oh, we went through all that, we must give the child the best. And what is this best? The other day, I was just having this conversation with the girls, doing something, and I made a mistake. And I'm like, Alicia, Liam, you are 6 years old, so I've only been a mom for 6 years. I mean, it's also still learning. Then they're like, what do you mean? But you mean you haven't been a mom for 46 years? I'm like, no, I haven't. So there's some things I do at work that I do very well because I've been doing it for a longer time than I've been a mom. And it actually clicked. And I think it has really worked wonders in our relationship because the other day I was cooking and I accidentally spilled the oil. And they're like, Mommy, it's okay. You've only been a mom for 6 years. And I said, actually, no, this is me for being clumsy for the last 46 years.
Hello and welcome to Make It Work, the bi-weekly podcast where we uncover inspiring stories of modern working mamas in Asia who have redefined their career paths whilst putting family first.
All right. Hello and welcome to another episode of Make It Work. I'm your host, Sarah Wong, and today we are in a very interesting location. We're in the Artground because I am having the founder of Artground today as my guest, and we have Luanne Poh, who actually is someone I met in preschool.
Not your preschool,
but at the preschool of my kids. And it's one of those situations where you do joke off and pick up. And Luanne was always the parent that I always have a corner of my eye. Oh, she seems really interesting, really cool. After the kids will be picked out, her two twin daughters, I think they were 3 or 4 then, she would be sitting with the 2 girls. I didn't remember that. She would be sitting with them reading Chinese books. And I was English speaking, and I am also English speaker. I once trying to speak more Chinese to my kids, and I was quite intrigued by how hands-on and how intentional Luanne was with reading and caring about them after preschool. So we caught up at the playground and at different times, and I later found out that she is also the founder of the Artground, which is a great place that my family, my kids really enjoy. It is the first multidisciplinary children's art center in Singapore, which Luanne will tell us more about what that really means. And I'm so glad to have my friend over here and, another woman in my mom tribe here. So without further ado, welcome Luanne.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, so I'm Luanne. As Sarah mentioned, I have a pair of twin girls. They are 6 this year. God forbid they are going to primary 1. Yeah. I run this space called the Artground. I co-founded it with my business partner, Jane. I call myself the chief worm at the Artground. And what that means is that essentially we believe the Artground is an ecosystem where families, parents, artists, children, educators all get together. We want to marry pedagogy with artistic practices, and the idea is that anything we do here, it's just a ground and a space to fertilize the next great idea, and if something fails, it just fertilizes the ground for something else to happen after. And that I'm just this worm that's boring underground, seeding, creating air holes and for water, and basically fertilizing the ground with my crazy ideas, working with artists in this ecosystem. So I'm the chief worm of the Artground.
I know why it's chief worm. I thought you were trying to adopt servant leadership.
Servant leadership also, I actually went and read the profiles of different sorts of leadership, and you're right. Servant leadership was actually what I identified with. But yeah, we just wanted to, when we first started the company of 4 of us, I was like, oh, Luanne, so you're the executive director. I'm like, executive director of 4 people just seems so crazy. So we all gave ourselves a pseudo name. My center manager was a busy bee. My business partner who was to help us with all the partnership was the rainmaker. And my colleague who does programming was flower power and the sunshine. So the idea was to bring in different elements like that.
And floral imagery it makes sense now.
Yes. Yeah, so that's the Artground. And me and my husband, we met at the Esplanade actually. We were both working in the Esplanade. That was how we met and then got married. And now here we are.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And bring us back to your personal story of motherhood. Can you tell us about something that you went through that, it was a really difficult situation, but...
So back then, when Iman and myself met and then got married, We were trying to, as anyone, we're like, we love children. We both knew we wanted to have kids right away. So we tried, but our fertility journey wasn't as smooth. We had to go see doctors. We needed assisted pregnancy and all that. But somewhere along the line, we felt pregnant naturally. And that was so amazing. We're like, oh yes. But at the Esplanade, I was basically working within the children and youth team where I was spearheading a lot of the children's programming back then. So we were about to open a show, a Playtime production, which was a show that we started for 2 to 4 year olds. It was like my first baby at work. It was a series that I held very dearly. I worked on the ground with it, worked with designers, the production team. So we found out we were pregnant, home kid and all. But I was like, but I was just about to open a show that week. So I called my gynae. I said, okay, I'll meet you next week. After my show opens, I'm like, okay. So then we were setting up for the show. I was moving, climbing, carrying stuff as I always did and would. And somewhere midweek, I felt odd, like, so my body feels different again. And I kind of just kept at it. And I remembered very vividly, like, that Friday morning, we were opening the show. That Friday, before I went to work, I did another test kit. And there was no more pink line. And I was so devastated. But I remember, like, okay, I still have to go to work. I still need to open the show. So as I sat in the studio and these like 200 preschoolers, 2-year-old toddlers came in, excited for the show. And I remember sitting there thinking like it's so dramatic, like sitting there thinking in the dark, like, this was not going to happen for me. This was not going to happen for me if I just kept working the way I was working. So by the end of that 3-week show run, I made a decision to leave and quit my job. Esplanade was an amazing place to work. It was not the job, it was just the way I was at the job. I only knew that way of working, and if I wanted to have and start a family, I felt like my body was telling me I needed to make a change. So because my boss didn't see it coming, she was like, what? But I explained to her, like, I just needed to do this for myself. I don't know why. I don't know how. I wasn't leaving for another job. I just felt like if I wanted to start a family, I needed to make this decision and then take the next step from that crossroad and then figure out how or what. So I thought, I could. I was like, which was like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. At that time, there was only the two of us. Both of us were working. So we didn't really, our expenses was high. We thought, we did some math and like, I could go without salary for a few months, like 6 to 9 months, we think, and just took some time to figure it out. So what happened was I said, I will work in Coffee Bean, make coffee or something. So the priority wasn't to stay in a job. The priority at that time was to figure out how to start a family. So that's what we did. So I gave a long service as a notice period because I wasn't leaving for anything. So I think I was there for another 3+ months until the next big project that I was heading finished. And then so I finished another Playtime, and then I left at the end of May, which was a good a time as any, I suppose.
Yeah. And then you have to tell us what happened next. Artground.
Yeah, kind of all weave together in retrospect. So when I was serving notice, the National Arts Council did an open call. They were looking for someone to start a Singapore Children's Art Centre. So I was like, I could do this. And I was back then under the false impression that if I had my own company, I could manage my time better and I could have an easier time at work. That's not true. It's so far from the truth. So I pitched for the project, just kind of like, I was not planning to do anything anyway. And miraculously, we got the pitch. We were awarded the project. And because there was a lot of things back and forth, paperwork, and there was assessment periods, we had to do panel interviews and all that. So we only incorporated the company for the Artground in December 2026. So I had that 6 months to actually rethink about what I was doing in my life and health and make some lifestyle changes. Before then, we started the company. And then we spent 6 months renovating and getting the programming ready. And then the Artground opened in 2017. And then by then, we went back into, going through the fertility treatments again and going through TCMs and all that. And then we conceived the next year. And then we had a baby. We had our twin girls in end of May 2019. Yeah, but I have to say, when you are trying for a child, the road seems endless. There never seems to be a light at the end of the tunnel because we've been there. But then when it actually happens, you don't remember. I think the body has this funny way. I don't remember how trying it was. That first 7 years, those 7 years when we were trying to have a kid. So we only had a kid in the 7th year of our marriage. So by the time, so you forget that it was a trying period. We got married in 2012. I left Esplanade in 2016, which means we had been trying for about 3-4 years. Yeah, so then it was so awful because every time someone felt pregnant, you felt bad for not being happy for them. Every time somebody said something or asked you a question, there's like a mixed sense of guilt and anger. But then I've realized, because of our experience, whenever someone comes to us and says, oh, Luanne, I'm thinking of going for IVF, what do you think, I realize now I can share. I can oh yeah, it's really, there's this thing you can do and then don't stress. I realize coming from that place has become a place of privilege because you now are able to share. You're now able to share from your own personal experience, and you're able to hopefully give some hope, some respite, or just some space. Sometimes we took a break from, I think somewhere in the midst of it, all the expectations, like, are we pregnant? Are we not? Took such a toll. I told my husband, no, I'm done. I'm just going to stop for a while. And that was another interesting part of the relationship because when we first started trying for a baby, my husband was quite resistant. He was like, oh, we shouldn't try to play God. We should just let it happen. We should, wait for, to be blessed. I'm like, yeah, I get that. But, I still felt that we had to make an effort. And after all the up and down, I was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And then my husband was like, oh, maybe, we should give it one more shot, And for those of us who struggle with that idea of, if we do IVF, are we trying to play God and all that? I've come to realize that if you believe, in a higher power and you believe in God, and ultimately you can go through all the procedures, but He's the one who gives it life. So that was how I kind of came to terms with it. Like, we're not trying to play God. If we're not going to get pregnant, we're not going to get pregnant, even if we went through the science route. But yeah. That's just, so that was a crazy thing. But now if you ask me, it's a vague, distant memory. Having kids that's pretty way.
I have more than one kid.
Yeah, they forget. But I have to say, I think it's true. I think because of the way we work at our jobs currently, I think we're really blessed to have twins, because if I had one, I don't think I could go through the whole IVF thing or whatever to try for another. It would have been, I think someone up there must have figured, like, I better give her 2. Look at, she's not going to do it again. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing such a personal story. So, like, if you could go back in time to yourself in that 7 years, like, what is something you would tell the younger Luanne?
Well, I would really tell her just not to be so hard on yourself. I think when there's always this untold pressure, like, oh, your body must be broken, everyone falls pregnant so easily, why did you have to not, why do you have to go see a doctor, why do you have all this additional help? I think I didn't realize how many of us go through that. I didn't realize the statistics of how many people actually go through IVF these days. Like, now, in retrospect, when I look around me, I think personally, out of, say, 10 friends I have who are married and childbearing age, I think at least 70% of us are going through some sort of assisted pregnancy. It's so crazy. I keep wondering, is it the food? Is it the lifestyle? There's many more of us do it than not, which is really, really worrying. Which is also why I think parenting has become so much more precious when you do have a kid. And at the same time, so much more pressurizing. Because there's that, like, oh, we went through all that, we must give the child the best. And what is this best, this level or standard that we're going for? I think that's the question we should always ask ourselves.
Well, so something like the process itself is one piece to be gentle, give yourself more grace. But then also the kind of attitude that you bring into being a parent after that. Put in so much effort.
Yeah.
Better well, you don't be a successful parent.
Yeah, that's all. And a lot of times we have a lot of single child households, so there's all that pressure on yourself to be the best parent to this one child you're having. And then for the child to excel and be the best he or she can be. I think it's good to be a conscious parent, to and to know what you want out of it, to know what you aspire for your child, I think that's inevitable. But I think for us, we had one step forward, two steps back attitude with the kids. With the girls, there's always like, oh, should we send them for swimming and Chinese classes? And they were like, no. So that because time is finite. So if you do this, then you kind of lose out on something else, right? So then we really had to make certain rules for ourselves as a family, what we wanted. And those rules sort of help us guide how we spend our time as a family and how we want to do certain things. Like for instance, one of the things was I told myself, only one class a weekend. That's it. Because I wanted to have time with the girls to do other stuff. So we really was like, okay, between swimming and this and that, and do I want to do phonics classes and English lessons and we kind of had to really think of what was really important. There's this thing that, parents sometimes say, oh, but my kid love going for classes. They do. Kids love to learn it. They thrive so much. They're like a sponge. That is true. And I think exposing the children to different things is really important as well. But I think as a family, we also decided that we really wanted to spend as much time as we have with the girls. One thing I realized, kind of related to this, is that I realized I'm only going to be really parenting them full-time the first 7 years of their life. Because after 7 years, they have all these other influences besides the fact that they go into primary school. And I read somewhere you're only a child's best friend until they're 10 years old. And then they have other best friends. They have their favorite person until they're 10. And then they will have other favorite people in their lives. And I think about that, I'm like, that's a really, really short time. And I think about myself and how I was and my relationship with my family, my parents. And I reflect upon the kind of relationship I want. And I want, for me, I want to really be my kids' friend. I really want for them to be able to come to us and talk to us about things that bother them and matters to them. Because I remember navigating a lot of these questions as a teenager. And, I grew up in a very typical Asian family. And, you don't really talk to mom or dad about things. So I really wanted the girls to be able to come to talk to us. So with that in mind, me and my husband was always very clear about the kind of relationship we wanted. We wanted to be respectful. We want a certain discipline, but yet we wanted them to know that they could come to us with, okay, how do you decide? So we decided that we wanted them to, so what was important? So it was important that they enjoyed learning. So we decided that we needed to send them to a Chinese class because they were going to take Chinese in school. I married Iman, my husband Iman, but he wanted the girls to take Chinese in school, which meant that the responsibility of learning Chinese falls on me. And I remember I was talking to my sister-in-law actually, and she said, you can send them to Chinese tuition, but going to a class once a week is not going to help them enjoy and love the language if there's no Chinese immersion at home. And the easiest way you can get them to learn and like the language is to speak it. And that's on you. I was like, okay, that's true. So I started to try to make an effort to speak to them in Mandarin at home. And then we also tried to instill certain things in the house. We found an Indonesian helper who could speak Chinese. And then we found them a Chinese class that was learning the language through play rather than learning the language academically. I think that helped because we are in the arts, so we know of arts companies and that do that. So when I went for the class, I thought it was amazing. And now the girls naturally code switch when they speak to the classmates who are from Beijing or Taiwan. So they naturally speak to them or the parent when they meet them, which was really cute. So for us, I think the language immersion was really interesting. Yeah. And then we felt like, so that was the one thing we wanted them to do. So that was the one thing we had. So the rest of the time, we would have different things that we do as a family. We'll go cycling, or they'll follow me to work a lot. And we realized that practical things was more important for the girls. We really wanted them to learn stuff from living life.
So it's a very intentional choice to bring them to certain places and your work thing about
yeah.
And then you think about what kind of things you want them to be exposed to at your work. Any kind of, your work.
Yeah, very much. So for us, I think, and a lot of what we do at the Artground is also about the care for each other. So parent-child are caring for each other in the space. The artists, when they create a program, they're caring for how the parents and children are using and engaging the space. So, so whenever they're here, even simple things like, they will help me welcome, like, hello everyone, welcome to the Artground, please take off your shoes, please sanitize your hands. Okay. So they will help me do very practical things like this. And then through that, they also sometimes play with the little ones. So sometimes when they're kids, I was like, oh, this one is alone, she's a little bit reserved. So can you help me play with her before the program starts? So they naturally are quite good sociable playmates. They naturally play.
My second child.
Yeah. And they love little ones. Like whenever they meet your little one, then you will like offer them food and stuff. So we also teach them about boundaries and respect. So they're lovely. They always offer food. And they were like, but you cannot just offer it to your friend. You have to offer it to the adult and ask them, is it okay for this person to eat this? Because they might have allergies or they might have certain rules in the house that's different from us. So we teach them about understanding boundaries and understanding respect, but in a realm of care. Because even at the Artground, we don't assume that everyone has the same sort of rules and everyone, what's okay for me might not be okay for you because, every household is different. So even with the artists, we always like, in the same care and respect, we're like, hi, we're going to offer you this prerogative, like this provocation, and we're going to offer you this stimuli. If you like to take it, please go ahead and do this with your kid and then with your child. And then, so we offer them, things as a suggestion, as a mode of suggestion for engagement. But the parent decides how you want to engage and how it works or not for yourself. And I think that's an important part of understanding how, like in China, 人与人之间, right? Like how do you relate to each other? And we cannot assume that everyone's exactly the same as us. And I think understanding that from a young age has really helped the girls because sometimes they will come to me and they'll see someone, they're like, I want to do this, but I'm not sure if this person likes it. What do you think, mom? And I'm like, oh, you could ask, or else, we will teach them to sort of break it down, like, why do you think this person might or might not want to do this? And how would you then change it? And that has, I think, made them a little bit more aware of their environment around.
It sounds like, yeah. I mean, those struck me that your girls are obviously very sociable, but also have high, I guess, EQ. I see how they welcome, the families to the Artground, and they are very, so okay, with like Asian culture, and then just hoping on like respect by others, right? So I have to try to ask our kids to always say hello to the aunties, uncles that you see at the playground and stuff like that. And I think they are an example of that. So yeah, I
guess it goes back to sort of having this vision of how you want your child to be in the future. I read somewhere that said that the hardest and best part about parenting is that you're preparing your child to live without you.
Yeah.
And the idea is that, and I always tell people I'm a very old parent, right? As in, I had the girls really late. So I was always, at the back of my mind, there's always just like, what if I leave before they were independent? So then what does that mean? And I felt what was important was that the girls learn to be independent and they know how to take care of each other as well as themselves. So from a young age, I think for us at our house, we've always had certain rules, like we felt worked for us. And we kept it as simple as we can so that we can use it in different situations. Like for us at home, we always said like, we always have to be kind and helpful. And if you have to choose being right and being kind, always choose to be kind. And then we'll give them some examples to sort of understand what that means. So then whenever something happens, like, do you want to be right or be kind? Then you kind of go back to that. And then another one that I came up with some years ago was, do not yuck on somebody's yum. Because they used to love to eat the same things and then they started to have different appetites. So somebody will like, oh, your kaya butter is so yucky. They're like, no, it's yummy. So like, okay, we don't yuck on somebody's yum because it might be yummy to them because it's not to you. So then we realized that you can also use it on different contexts. Like if somebody wanted to play something and you didn't want to do it and like, yeah, but that's what they want to do. It's like, yeah, but it's not fun. It's like, yeah, but you don't yuck on somebody's yum. And then now I have this other thing called time is finite. So every time we're like, yeah, you can take so long to do this, and if you want to take 20 minutes in the shower, that's fine because it's fun for them to be in the shower. So I was like, but then that just means you have less time to do your drawing later because time is finite. I'm like, yep. So then we try to explain to them but ultimately it changed in the sense that what becomes a priority. But the rules themselves, we might use them less now, but then another rule might come up. Like I think one rule we really had a hard time imposing was, why do some of my friends get all the screen time but we don't? So yeah, so the rules in our house are just different. And we didn't really want to go with the do as I say, no as I do thing. So we had to kind of explain why we think screen time is not ideal for them and what alternatives we have. And then, and the rules are just different. Sometimes the rules in our house is just different from somebody else's house. And that's not good or bad. And they've come to accept that, okay, the rules are just different.
Yeah.
So, but I think it has helped the girls understand the boundaries. And I think when they trust enough rules, sometimes when there's a rule like the screen time rule, it's a little bit abstract. They're kind of like, okay, because all other rules have worked, I guess this rule works too, and I will eventually understand it.
Yeah, something interesting I heard recently about this screen time thing. This is from the parents. They're a bit older. They said that I think they went to a parent-teacher meeting at the primary school and then said, this is a common phrase everyone hears, like, oh, all my friends have handphones, or they all have phones and they are screen time, da, da, da. And then you feel that pressure and you feel guilty, right? So apparently at this PTA session, they asked the parents who actually give their kids mobile phones to stand up. And actually it's a minority. So that was the school kind of telling the parents that, hey, actually this is not the norm. Your kids might be telling you that, but
it's actually just one class. It's just one class.
Minority, right? Yeah, but obviously when that person has something that everybody wants, it's like, oh, why can't I get it? So yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, apparently, yeah. So because I think most of us conscious parents and like responsible parents all know that it's probably not something that we want to do too much of. So yeah, it's we need to get like
yeah. So I think it's hard. I recognize it's really, really hard. But the fact is that when you go to a cafe or a restaurant for a meal, you do see a lot of kids with a screen. And what we do is that I mean, I know it seems hard sometimes, but actually what we do is that I always have paper and coloring pencils in my bag. It doesn't have to be a lot of things. It just has to be a notebook and, you know, one of those like cylinder wooden coloring pencil pack things that you always get at freebies and goodie bags and whatever. I always have a pack in my bag, and now the girls know to pack it in their own bags. And whenever we're in a restaurant or whenever they have to wait, I just give it to them. Yeah. So no questions asked, I just can't give it to them. And they're like, what are we going to do? And say anything. And now they consciously will ask to draw. And when we go on away and we have a road trip, they draw. Yeah. And my challenge now is sometimes like, I need y'all to stop drawing and go to bed. But I think that has become a thing. And now when I go out and I'm meeting other families whom I know have access, whose children I know have access to phones and iPads, I bring extra paper and extra coloring pencils. Or sometimes I might bring something a little special, like a pack of stickers. And then during meal times, I whip it out before the iPad comes out. Or sometimes the iPad comes out and the girls are like, you know, obviously they're watching. And I'm like, yeah, then I might do like a little drawing challenge, or just like, hey, who can draw me the most beautiful underwater world or whatever. Then they start drawing or draw the most number of like sea creatures, you know. So they will try to draw different sea creatures. Yeah, and then the other kids get into it because kids intrinsically actually do all love to draw. And then other kids will get into it, and then you end up putting away the iPad.
You really are like, what saying?
Yeah, because actually I feel like a lot of it are habits that we breed. We habits form. What's it? They say habits form in 21 days.
Yeah.
So if you just start a habit, I think, and an easy one, I mean, I recognize that it's hard, it's challenging. You can't always, but the coloring pencil and paper, I think has saved my life so many times. Even when I'm like busy working and I have to do something and the girls are like, you know, mommy, and I need to finish a paper or an email or whatever. And I was like, you know, let's get some pen and paper out. And it gives us something to do, or just, can you make me I'm really tired? Can you make me a get well card, or can you just draw me a thing, or draw each other or whatever? And the girls get into it, and as we do more and more, it becomes less tedious to try to get them to draw, you know, and it becomes easier to peel them away from something that you might not want them to do.
I think it's as much a discipline for us to follow as parents, that, as much as we want to them and do it for our kids, right? About doing something a little bit more inconvenient, and maybe especially if there are other children around, it's like you don't even impose it, or like it's an easier thing to follow with whatever everyone wants to do, which is usually the thing. So
yeah, I've become that thick-skinned parent. So now, because when we hang out with other families or cousins or whoever, and then they know, they kind of sometimes try to like, they know that we don't do the screen time, so they sometimes also like paise a bit. They're like, oh, maybe we should keep our screens, but they know that the kids are engaged, right? And that's their habit. And I don't think it's right for me to say you should stop watching the screen because I don't let my kid watch the screen. Right? My rule doesn't apply to yours. The rules in our house is different from yours. So then the responsibility on me is that I will bring an extra paper or pencils, which actually, and I don't think it's an inconvenience. It's for me, I'm gonna pack paper and pencils anyway. I'll just pack an extra set. And with twins, you have always more than one set of everything anyway. And the fact is that the kids really do all enjoy drawing, and they all start exchanging And there are a lot of games that you can play. We used to do this thing where everyone gets a piece of paper, and then you draw something on it for 30 seconds. I just set a timer on my phone, and every 30 seconds it beats, you have to swap, and then somebody will add to your picture, and then you keep doing it until you get back. Yeah, so there are lots of things that you can do on the table with these. But yes, you're right. It's about combining what I do at work and parenting.
Which is really great. Okay, so I want to kind of go back to a little bit of that work and motherhood, that juggle. So you mentioned earlier that you had wrongly assumed that starting your own business would give you laundry. So what's something you wish you knew about starting your own thing and becoming a working parent?
When I started my own company, I realized after a while that, besides keeping the company afloat and keeping the livelihood of X number of staff that you have, there are also other things like conflict resolution.
Yeah.
There's also career progression that you want to think about, because in a small company, there isn't much career progression, as opposed to, obviously I came from the Esplanade where we had like 250 or more staff. So there was a track, there was a career progression track that you work towards. But in the company of, like I said, when we started 4, there was really no. Even now, since then, we've grown to be a team of 10. But even then, yes, there's obviously like your junior staff and your managers. But in terms of the managers, the track is, I have to say, limited. And then what I always tell the team is like, what we lack is that we make up for job satisfaction and what you love to do at work. And I want to make sure you're doing what you love. So the company and the programs evolves as the team evolves and the interests, and whilst we stay true to what the company is mandated to do, we also, within the programming, we have certain sort of room to play with and people that we can work with to do certain things that then allows each of us to be more vested and passionate about pursuing certain interests within our frame of work, because I realized that you spend a lot of time at work, so you have to like what you do.
Right.
And I practice a lot of sort of what we say in entrepreneurship as well. So there's a lot of this idea of like within your area of work, there's a lot of things that you can do. And I don't like to micromanage. So what do you want to do, and how do you think you can excel in your work in doing that? Let's give you the support that you need to do that. And we also have working moms. I have colleagues who are married with children, without children, younger colleagues who are not yet. So we want to balance all that. And still be fair, like I can't kind of give working moms all the flexibility and privilege. And then I forget that just because you're married but without a kid doesn't make you any less need for flexibility. And everyone has different responsibilities. So how do we manage all that? Whilst giving a sense of, it's about being equitable. It's not about equality is one thing, but also, being equitable in what one person needs at one time. And, like this time my colleague might need more flexible time because she's got a family member in the hospital or who's in need of some medical care. And then this time we need more flexibility because this person has just had a baby and, So I think it's about that sort of management within the company to keep. So I have this idealistic thing where the company is still, it's like a family as well, because you spend so much time together. So it's also understanding enough about each person to try to manage that.
If I what you're saying reminds me of something I read in a blog entry that you wrote, right? I think it was you talking about your time as a young mom during COVID, and you're running this, and your kids were probably less than white. So we said that the new normal allows them the opportunity and voice to carve out new job scope as you continue to decide for yourself the kind of person, mother, daughter, employee we would like to be. So yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you have embraced this to achieve more from Artground. Yeah, and practices in your company.
Yeah. So I think actually it was really that when I came back I had the girls in May 2019, but the girls were preemies. I had them at 29 weeks because I was still working the way I was working. So I was still climbing up and down at the Artground. And I remember very vividly, it was a Sunday and I was climbing up and down. And then in retrospect, I really shouldn't have. And then I started like leaking. I thought I was incontinent. I thought, I was just going to my 3rd trimester. The babies were pushing into my bladder. But I just kept like having to change every 30 minutes. I'm like, Then I decided to call the hospital, and then they're like, you should come in and check. And then I went in and I'm like, oh, your water bag has broke. It's like, what? And people are like, yeah, you're gonna have to, but you're in labor, you're having contractions. Then we're like, I was, what? I said, don't you feel it? I was like, I thought the baby was growing. Everybody told me the 3rd trimester was when I was gonna balloon. So I felt this tightening. I just thought the baby was growing. Then they're like, no, you're having contractions. So I ended up being in this 90-hour labor because they were trying to stop the contraction because I was only 29 weeks. So they were like, you have to bed rest for 10 weeks and we have to keep the baby in as long as possible. So when I was lying down was when I don't leak anymore. I was just like, okay, this is crazy. So they had to give me this medicine to stop the contraction. And then my heart was beating so fast, it was palpitating. Okay, then we stopped. And 12 hours later, they gave me the contractions came back. They gave me the medicine again. And then they stopped. And then 6 hours later, the contractions came back. And then 4 hours later, then okay, the medicine's losing its efficiency. You're gonna give birth soon. So I kind of went through this for like 4 days.
Oh my God.
So then we gave birth on that Thursday. So, but I mean, my point was that, and after that, the girls was in the incubator for about 7 weeks. Oops of mom guilt. Them girls were so small. One of them was Aliyah was only 1.2 kilo. Alicia was just over 1 kilo. They were so small. And I obviously at that point it was an awful feeling. I felt like, oh my God, what a terrible mom. How could I have done this to my own children? How could they? They were all strapped up and needed and poked. So we kept telling ourselves the wonderful thing was that we could watch them grow outside of the womb, which we did. And we watched them thrive. We watched them do a lot of things. And there was a lot of things that was thrown out the window. I thought, oh, I was going to breastfeed. I was going to no birth my child. They were not going to use the pacifier. None of that happened. I had to use the pacifier because they didn't learn to suckle in the womb, but that they were supposed to in the third trimester. So the nurses said that they needed a pacifier so that they can learn to start to suckle. Because then they were tube fed because they, and their mouth was so small anyway. I couldn't come up with enough breast milk for them. So very shortly after we had to supplement donor's milk. Heaps of guilt there. And then I obviously did not hypnobirth them. But then after that, so I took the 6 months leave. I took a 6 months break from work. So I took the mandatory 3 months and I kind of spread out my last month over like 3 months. So I kind of did like a 3-day, 4-day week situation for about 6 months to have that flexibility. But then I realized the minute I had to come back to work, my colleagues were like, Luanne, we're going to pass you're back full time now. I needed to do the... So I remember being in the office trying to hum and express milk, and I was having meetings and like my milk supply just dropped so drastically. I wasn't really doing that much then. And there was all these things and I realized that, and every day I went home at 6 to my babies who were already in bed, So we would take one baby while my helper would take the other baby, and then we change every night. So every night we'll spend the night doing the night feeds and everything with one of the babies, and that was how we worked out. And I did this for about 3 months, and I remember thinking, this is not how I want to be a mom. I didn't want to come back at 6 every day and only see them overnight, And I obviously also work weekends because of the programs that we have. And then COVID hit when they were 9 months. So then we went into lockdown in March. And actually, personally, for me, COVID was the best thing that ever happened to me as a working mom. Because for the next year and a half too, I spent so much time with them. We had all this time to bond. We were able to figure out, me and my husband was able to figure things out. Because I realized it was also really challenging for him to be a dad and to want to be involved and to be so helpless when the girls was in the incubator. Poor wife was, stuck doing confinement and this and that and trying to understand all that, navigating the body and all the changes and all my emotional highs and lows, and never really figure out, like one day I was like, I want to breastfeed exclusively. And then they said, still. And then he was like, then he's like, do you want to breastfeed? It's so hard. And I think it's really hard for the husband as well. But anyway, so then having COVID and then having that flexibility and then understanding. And I had colleagues who resisted working from home because they didn't like the idea of doing this Zoom meetings. And they're like, no, we're not really gathering as a team. We, like I said, we really try to build a team as a family. So they're like, we're not seeing each other. We're not building. This Zoom meetings doesn't really help me understand and work. And so we had colleagues who resisted that. But we had colleagues who, even those without kids, who really enjoyed the time and flexibility they had with their elderly parents and all the needs that they have. So, and I don't think it would have, in a weird way, I don't think we would have ever had that flexibility as a working mom if COVID didn't happen. Yeah. I think working from home, having Zoom meetings and all that was never even on the horizon. Like you only did online meetings with overseas arts and partners and business partners when you needed to. It was never the norm. But I think it really helped us, and even up to now, we still embrace certain sort of flexibility that working moms or anybody in the colleague, anyone in the company needed. So we still have some colleagues who have some days that they work from home. We have some colleagues who work exclusively in the office 5 days a week. And we choose to exercise that flexibility based on what you need, as long as the work gets done. And then we've sort of found a way around that to make it work. And I think it goes back to, I suppose, the care. Earlier I spoke about the care that we have for families who come in, and the care that we want to employ and engage artists and families. I think the same care goes for our colleagues as well. Like we need that so that everyone feels cared for, so that everyone can thrive. And I think that's kind of important.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I can see your style is very flexible, very open for the change, and very resourceful as well. So I can imagine that that's the vibe, I guess, with your team, and probably to what we have to be open to like different changes. Okay. Well, I think as we wrap up, I think we talked quite a lot about, part about parenting and how you integrate maybe daily life with being intentional, using art. Is there anything else that you would like to add about how parents can build a relationship with their children through art, from whatever you've done and learnings that you've had in your work here?
Well, I mean, through art, just because that's our medium. But I think the main thing I've learned being a parent in just the last 6 years, and actually the other day I was just having this conversation with the girls, like they were doing something, and then they kind of were having dinner, and then they were cleaning up, and then they spilled something. They're like, "Oh, mommy, I'm sorry, but I'm still learning. And it's okay that I make a mistake, right?" Which is what we tell them all the time. Like, yeah, it is, Then I think I'm doing something and then I made a mistake. And I'm like, Alicia, Leah, mommy is also still learning. You are 6 years old, so I've only been a mom for 6 years. So I haven't been a mom very long either. Then they're like, "What do you mean? But you're already like 46 years old." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm 46, but I've only been a mom for 6 years, for as long as you've been born." They'd be kind of like, "Oh, you mean you weren't a mom before?" I was like, "No."
I think that's a really good point.
Well, that
when I tell myself, actually, yeah. And you're always like 5 years.
Yeah. And the thing is, having to tell myself this, but having to tell your child. And they're like, "Oh, you mean you haven't been a mom for 46 years? I'm like, "No, I haven't." So they're like, "Oh, so like there's some things I do at work that I do very well because I've been doing it for a longer time than I've been a mom." So, and it actually clicked. And I think it has really worked wonders with that relationship, because the other day, and I did something, I was cooking and I accidentally spilled the oil. And I was like, "Oh." Then they're like, "Mommy, it's okay. You've only been a mom for 6 years."
Like roasting.
And then I said, "Actually, no, this is me for 46. It's just me being clumsy for the last 46 years. But thank you for extending that sort of empathy and like that sort of understanding that it's okay for me to make a mistake as well." And they're like, "Oh." So I think one thing was I've learned that, yeah, we have to give our kids a lot more credit than we think. And also that having them, and also really seeing them as they are, because I've learned in every time when we work with children, we always talk about how every child is really different. And it has not been more true than me raising a pair of identical twin girls with similarly the same, DNA and all that. But they are so different. And I cannot even use the same parenting techniques on one as well as the other. Because we always joke and laugh about how like one's like a puppy and one's like a cat. So one's really like, the other one's kind of like, "Oh." And then one's compliant if I raise my voice a little, and one's kind of the cat's totally opposite, And then I realized that I needed to learn how to navigate, but still sort of be fair, but understand that each child needs their own time and space to be. I think that's the biggest challenge, and it continues to be one. And evolve as well as their characters grow. But I think the art as a medium has allowed us to take time to see them as they are. So even a very simple idea of drawing, when they draw, I can take the time in between each stroke to really just look and see what they're doing and ask them questions, which has really sort of been helpful in understanding what they're thinking about. Why did you draw this, and who's here and what's there, and understanding things that might happen, their friends and all that, things that might have happened in school. And it's just a medium. So it can be any medium. Like it can be if you enjoy cooking together, if you enjoy cycling together, being in a playground together, even if you're playing games together, I suppose. I think it is taking time to understand really your child as a person, as because your child is really growing and developing. as the day goes, and before you know it, they're somebody else's best friend, and but I have to say, like, I think one of your questions was also prior to the interview was like, what was one of your proudest moments? I have to say my proudest moment was this morning. This morning, because we're now without a helper, as I mentioned. So this morning, the girls woke up, I showered, they got dressed, and they made me breakfast. So after they got dressed, they woke me up.
Did you let them train and walk on their own?
Yeah, so we have been trying to train. Yeah, so we've been walking a distance, and then we've been doing the whole like, okay, you're gonna walk, and then we're gonna try to look. So right to that vision, the end vision, I need them to be independent, and if today is as good as any to start. So yes, I would say that them walking into our room dressed and ready for bed, and when I went to get shower, they made me breakfast. Today, my proudest moment, but I will caveat and say I believe tomorrow I'll have another proudest moment, because I think they're just gonna constantly surprise you, and I think it's us just looking for those bits.
So good. Thanks very much, Luanne.
No problem.
Sing so question. Always ask every guest. So can we have it all?
Yes, I think we can have it all. I think you just need to know what all means. I don't think all means having all the money and all the freedom and all the time and all. I think if you decide what is your everything, rather than all, if my everything is my children, and then being happy and me having a happy relationship within my immediate family, I think I can have everything.
I think that's a great time to end our conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Make It Work, where we uncover inspiring stories of modern working mamas in Asia who have redefined their careers whilst putting family first. Please help others discover the show by leaving a review and rating on wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and TikTok. Meanwhile, here's to you, making it work.